the topic for today is our unequal world, evolution of inequality in contemporary world. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Huh?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Okay, right. Thank you. So, inequality is an important issue in the present day world because the world over there is an economic growth, lot of growth, but still there are a lot of inequalities. In fact, the inequality is increasing in many countries. So we will see why inequality matters first, because we are talking about the inequality, so we should understand why it is important from the perspective of economists. Okay, so first one is the relationship between economic growth and inequality. So way back in 1950s or so, Simon Kuznets, a Nobel economist, argued that initially when the economy starts growing, there will be an increase in inequality. As per capita income increases, inequality will increase. But after reaching certain level of economic development, further economic growth and further economic development will lead to decrease in inequality. See, this is what famously called the Kuznets curve or Kuznets hypothesis. So this is shown in the diagram in the form of a graph which is inverted U-shaped curve. So as per capita income increases, inequality increases first and then reaches a maximum and then it starts decreasing. So economic growth will ultimately lead to decrease in inequality or more equitable distribution of income. That is what Simon Kuznets hypothesis implies. But what happens? That is what whether Kuznets hypothesis has come true or there is some problem. We are going to see in this presentation. So there are two issues in economic growth. One is efficiency and another is fairness. Efficiency means more growth or more productivity, more economic, more GDP, something like that. So efficiency means it is about the size of economic pie. Okay, the pie becomes larger, so everybody will be able to get a fair share of that. Okay, so how the pie, the economic pie, that means GDP of a country. That is what we metaphorically call it, pie, economic pie. So, and how this pie or the GDP is divided among different sections of the people. That is about distribution, whether it is fairly distributed or unfair. Fair means more equitable or egalitarian kind of society. Unfair means more unequal society. Okay, so there are two things here. One is efficiency, which is about the size of the pie, and another is fairness, which is about the division of the pie or sharing of the pie across the different sections of the people in a society. And then inclusive growth. Nowadays, there is a lot of talk about inclusive growth, specifically because of this rising inequality. So there is an argument among several economists that the economic growth has not been inclusive. It has excluded several people, especially it has marginalized the poor and downtrodden people, and only a few sections of the society have benefited from economic growth. So we need inclusive growth, which includes all the people. Okay. Then next is big inequalities in income and wealth often translate into inequalities in opportunity. So inequality has another important dimension, which means inequality reproduces itself across generations and over time. That means if there is an inequality, or some people, there are some people who are rich, some people who are poor. So rich people will be able to accumulate more wealth. Using more wealth, they will be able to earn more income in the next period also. That means their progenies also. So in that way, inequality provides inequalities in income and wealth often lead to inequalities in opportunity. Okay, a rich person gets more opportunity to get lot of business opportunities or employment opportunities or higher studies opportunities, all those kind of things. Whereas people in the bottom of the pyramid, they will not be getting so much opportunities because their educational attainment is slow, their investment capacity is slow, so they are not able to catch up with the, or even absolutely they will not be able to grow economically because of inequality. Okay, this is another issue. Then disparities in health and education. So this is what mainly the implication for human capital. So human capital development will be very low among the people who are poor in economic situation. Okay, So then unable to use the human capital is not developed, and hence people are not able to, economy is not able to utilize the human capital capacities. We now and see, yeah, now we are going to see historically how this inequality has evolved over a period of time. So after World War II until 1980, there was I mean, before going into the whole period of World War II to 1980, what happened immediately after the World War and immediately after the Great Depression was that Great Depression happened in the 1930s. World War was in 1945 or so. It ended in 1945. The Second World War. After that, policymakers world over recognized three problems. One is macroeconomic instability, economic instability. Then unregulated market economies. There was unfettered markets. There was no regulation, and it was a free economy or free market economy. And there were naturally this has resulted in mounting inequalities. There was a huge increase in the inequality. So how to solve these problems? How to regulate the economy? How to how to establish stability in macroeconomy, and then how to reduce the inequalities. These were the three challenges that the policymakers faced. Then this laid the foundation for the social democratic welfare state. Welfare state is nothing but it is a kind of democratic capitalism only, but here there will be a lot of government enterprises or public enterprises. There will be a lot of trade union activities, and the government is more about more leaning towards left there rather than to the right. That means more labor-friendly government or things like that. So this has resulted in more equitable distribution, at least better than what it is nowadays. Okay, so the modern welfare state first took shape in Scandinavia, especially in the Sweden, where the Workers' Party won the elections in 1932. Because of that, the welfare states came into existence in many parts of Europe, and even in countries like India after the independence, what we had until 1980s or 1990s, until the globalization policies were followed, we had a lot of public sector enterprises, and there were a lot of trade unions. So this has resulted in more equitable distribution of income. We are going to see all those things, income distribution in India over a period of time in later slides. Okay, so that way, until 1980, there was more equitable distribution as compared to what it is now, at least. So this has happened because of better macroeconomic management, okay, by the governments in those times, that is welfare state. That is, there was progressive taxation and redistribution. There was more tax on rich people. So this has naturally resulted in more income being transferred from the rich people to the poor people. So via tax, the rich people's income are partly shared with the government, which the government has in turn used for welfare activities to increase the economic situation of the poor people. So that way it is a kind of more redistribution and more taxation. And there was trade unions and minimum wages laws. So minimum wages laws and the trade unions are very important for improving the welfare of the poor people, especially the workers. So that was also there. And there were a lot of workplace safety regulations. Then government provided health insurance and retirement benefits, social safety net for the least fortunate. So all these things were there in place, which was ensured by the welfare state. So this has resulted in more equitable distribution or egalitarian economic distribution. Okay, after 1980s, what happened was there were three important things. So but that has resulted in more inequality. It's globalization, then automation, and then the growing power imbalance between capital and labor. So capital is owned by a capitalist, and labor, it is a working class. So there is a more growing imbalance between the capital and labor. This has happened mainly because of the marginalization of the trade unions. So trade union, the power of the trade unions has started declining after the globalization and liberalization policies world over, not only in India, in many countries this has happened. And this has contributed to the problem because its rules have been written to benefit business owners, finance capital, and high-skilled workers over everyone else. So the main reason is that the globalization was more beneficial to the capital owners rather than the owners of labor. Okay, so that was the main reason. So business owners, finance capital, high skilled workers, and other things. Then, so labor intensive products can be manufactured in countries where collective bargaining arrangements are weak and non-existent, such that wages are systematically repressed. That means the labor intensive activities were transferred from the high income countries to the poor countries where the are not exactly the poor countries where the collective bargaining arrangements are weak. That means where there are no trade unions, or if at all there may be trade unions, but their activities or their vigorousness will be very low. So that way collective bargaining is weak means that is beneficial for the capital to exploit the labor. So that is where the labor intensive activities were transferred. Okay, so that way there was decreasing power of labor and increasing power of capital in relation to labor. So we are now going to discuss about the two types of inequalities. One is income inequality and another is wealth inequality. So income inequality, income is a flow, whereas wealth is a stock. So more income leads to more wealth and more wealth leads to more income because people get a lot of income from wealth. That means mainly the productive capital owned by the rich people. So income is every month or every year that we are getting, it is going on, continuous. It is a flow that is continuous, but wealth is relatively stable and it is a stock. So which may be accumulated over a period of time by the rich people because of high income. A part of the income becomes saving after consumption. If rich people will have more savings, the savings will be converted into wealth. So that way wealth will be accumulating over a period of time for rich people. So and then this wealth will produce in turn more income. So that way income inequality and wealth inequality reproduce each other. Okay, they reinforce each other. So we are now going to talk about two economists. One is Thomas Piketty, who did a lot of research on inequalities, and another is Branko Milanovic. One is the French economist Thomas Piketty, who has written a very famous book, which has become an overnight favorite book of the year in which it was published, that is Capital in the 21st Century, in which he elaborately discusses about the evolution of inequality across many countries world over. Okay, so that is Piketty's book. Then second is Branko Milanovic. He is a Serbian-American economist. So he is in the City University. Two books on inequality to base presentation mainly on the works of these two economists. Okay, so Capital in the 21st Century. We are going to take up first the book by Piketty. So this book he has formulated a hypothesis or idea which says that, or argument which says that when the rate of return on capital is more than the economic growth. Economic growth is the growth of GDP or something like that, the overall economic growth. Rate of return on capital is, so which in the return on capital includes profits, dividends, interest, rents, and other income from capital. Whatever income that accrues from ownership of capital is called the return on capital. So when the return on capital is owned by the capitalist, when the return on capital is greater than the economic growth, then that leads to more inequality. Say, for example, when the rate of growth is low, then wealth tends to accumulate more quickly from R than from labor. And say, for example, national GDP is contributed by the income from broadly capital and labor. So the whole population of a country can be divided into two groups. One is capitalists and labor. Okay, so whoever owns capital and gains and get income from capital are called capitalists. And whoever relies mostly opposed of the labor income and capital income. So the rate of return on capital means the income from capital is more than the overall growth in the total income. Then naturally the capitalists will be getting more share of the nation's income. So that way that leads to increased inequality. Okay, so top 10% or top 1% will be accumulating more and more wealth and income, and that will finally lead to reduced income share for the poor people. So that way it will increase the inequality. That is his thesis. So thus the fundamental force can be summed So fundamental inequality between the return on capital and so when R is it is what so the economist Milanovic who formulated this elephant, which is that means how the income happens for different people. Say, for example, you're a poor person, your income grows at very low level. That is on the starting point of the bread, which is in the like around different shape. So different raising. So that is why it is called elephant drugs. So it's a very popular answer.
Sir, sir,
சொல்லுங்க
சார் வாய்ஸ் பிரேக் ஆயிட்டே இருக்குங்க சார், கிளியரா வர மாட்டேங்குது.
So this elephant curve simply implies that as your income increases, the rate of growth of income also increases. So as someone becomes poor, transforms from poor person to rich person, then if you move along the red line shows the growth rate. So growth rate of the real income of the people. So for the rich people, the growth rate in income is low. As we told already, inequality reproduces inequality. So that way, poor people have less capacity to increase their income over a period of time. So naturally, their growth rate will be low. As their income increases, the rate of increase in the income also increases. As people become rich and richer and richer, for middle class people, for example, the income growth rate is very high. And then when 75th percentile and up to 85th percentile, the rate of growth in income is decreasing. So for some people, so the income is decreasing. And then again, after 85th percentile, the income starts steeply increasing. The income means the growth rate of income. So that is booming global elite, whom we call booming global elite. So for the reason for decline in the percentile groups between 65 to 75 or so is mainly due to the decline of the developing world middle class. The income, decrease in the income or slow growth rate of income for the people in the middle class people in the developing countries. So, sorry, developed countries. Okay, so that is another thing. Then, second aspect of my presentation is about mostly the ideas from Capitalism Alone, which was the book written by Branko Milanovic, the American economist. So we are going to skip some of this. So money making is the main aim of modern society. That is what he basically argues. So this is understood by everybody, very easily transferred from, this idea is getting translated to every people of the world very easily, and that it gets widespread acceptability. So naturally, people are nowadays, nobody needs to explain this because people are after money. So accumulation of money and wealth has become the primary objective of life. So that is what we are going to see in these two slides. So I am rushing through it, so it may not be explained very much. That is, so we are now going to look at the data, that is global inequality and the long-term trends. So what happened after World War was global inequality stood at its highest level ever at about 75 Gini points. So that means 75%. Gini value is 0.75 after the World War II. Then it remained at that high plateau until the last decade of the 20th century. So it remained at the high plateau until the end of the 20th century. Then from World War II to 1980, the gap between the West and Asia, mainly the China and India in particular, did not change very much, though income was very skewed in favor of the West. So between the World War II and 1980, there was a wide gap between the West, that is Western Europe and the US on the one side, and Asia on the other side. Asia mainly includes China and India. So this did not change very much. And there was a very highly skewed distribution of income towards in favor of the West. So this was the trend. So that income gap began to change and dramatically so after the 1980s. So what happened after 1980s is that the income distribution between these two geographical regions, that is the Western countries, including Western Europe and America on the one side, and the Asian economies, mainly the China and India. So this difference started decreasing between these two geographical location regions of the world has started decreasing. It is mainly because of growth in China. So, China has abandoned the communist or socialist policies after the 1980s, after the death of Mao. And there has been widespread adoption of capitalist policies in China. So it has grown at the rate of almost 8% per capita per annum over the next 40 years. So over a period of 40 years, from 1980 to 2020 or so, it has been increasing at a phenomenal growth rate of about 80% per capita. So this has sharply narrowed the difference between or the income gap or inequality between the West and the Asian countries. So if you look at these trends in the global Gini, you will be able to understand this. So from 1900 onwards, if you take, the Gini has gone above 0.65 or so, and it has remained almost at the same level up to 1980 or so. After 1980, it has started slightly decreasing. So especially because of the revolution in the information and communication technology industry and the rise of Asia. So the industrial revolution has largely benefited the Western countries, especially the Western Europe and US. Whereas ICT revolution has benefited not only the US and the Western countries, but more proportionately the developing countries like China and other countries in Asia, including India. So this has resulted in a decline in inequality after the 1980s, especially because of the growth of Asian economy, especially China's and India's economy. So this is another graph which has been drawn from the year 1960. This is again, inequality was remaining static from 1960 to 1980 or so, and then from 1980 onwards, the inequality has started steeply increasing, and by only after ICT only the inequality has started down, especially in the latter part of the 20th century and in the last 2 decades of the present century, 21st century. The inequality has started decreasing across the world. This is across the world, not intra-country inequality. This is global inequality or global Gini. So the economic revolution in China was followed by similar acceleration of growth in India, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia, and elsewhere in Asia. So many Asian countries have also accelerated their economic growth, following China. Then, although this growth has been accompanied by rising inequality within each of these countries, the closing of the gap with the West has helped reduce global. Yeah, this is another important. This is the important thing that we have to bother a lot, because even though the Asian countries were able to close their gap in terms of income vis-a-vis the Western countries, but intra-country inequality within Asia and China, within China and India has increased a lot after the 1980s, after the globalization and the liberalization policies. Okay. So on the one hand, the overall income level of China and India have increased, which has resulted in the reduced global Gini, or decrease in the global Gini, or decrease in the gap between the Western countries and India and China. Whereas intra-country inequality in these two countries have increased phenomenally after both of these countries adopted globalization and liberalization policies. Then this is so the convergence of Asian incomes with those in the West took place during information and communication technology. This we have already seen. So this revolution has favored Asia mainly, unlike the Industrial Revolution, which favored the Western countries. Then, yeah, it also contributed for the deindustrialization of the West. So ICT technologies, after the ICT technologies, the Western economies, especially the US economy and some of the most developed economies in the Western Europe, they have moved from industrial society to post-industrial society. That means service economy. Most of the economic the large part of the GDP of America and other the most developed countries come from a service sector like ICT industries, not from the heavy industries anymore. So this is what we call the deindustrialization of the West. So these industries got relocated to China and India partly, the heavy industries from the West, and we also increased our income in the ICT investments also. So in 1970, the West produced, for example, 56% of the world output, and Asia produced only 19%. What happened after the ICT revolution and in the recent period is very phenomenal increase in the contribution of the Asia to the world GDP. So Asia's contribution has increased from 19% to 43%. And Western countries' contribution has decreased from 56% to 37%. This is a very important, trend or economic outcome that has happened because of ICT revolution. Then we can see this trend clearly by comparing the United States with China and Germany with India. So you see these two graphs. One compares the US GDP contribution to the world GDP along with China. Another graph compares Germany's GDP contribution to the world along with India. So if you see the US contribution to the world GDP in terms of percentage, not absolute value of the GDP. So in terms of percentage, the US GDP is steeply falling contribution to the world. So from 40% to almost 17% or so. But if you look at China's contribution to the world GDP, it is steeply increasing, especially after 1980 liberalization policies. Same thing with India. So China's contribution to world GDP is now more than US contribution to the world GDP in terms of percentage. Similarly, India's GDP contribution to the world is more than Germany's contribution to the world GDP. So this is how it has happened. So the liberalization along with ICT revolution in the Asian countries to Asian giants like India and China have contributed for a large increase in phenomenal increase in their share to the global GDP. So this is the same graph which is shown in a very decent diagram. So same thing here. So China's GDP versus US GDP. Then, so we can think of Industrial Revolution and ICT revolution as mirror image of each other. Why we call it mirror image of each other? Because Industrial Revolution has resulted in increase in the global inequality through enrichment of the West. Whereas ICT has resulted in income convergence among large swaths of the globe through the enrichment of Asia. So on one hand, the Industrial Revolution increased the global inequality, whereas ICT revolution has reduced the global inequality mainly because of enrichment of Asia. So this is a very important trend. Then the economic rebalancing of the world. That is another thing. That is, this is not only in terms of geographical and economic rebalancing, but it is also political rebalancing. Rebalancing here means the balance between the economic power, political power between the Western countries and the Asian countries. Say, for example, China versus USA. Their economies have become more, getting on par with each other, equal to each other. Also, their political power and military power and geographical power, everything. So China has become is a big challenge to US in terms of not only economic growth but also in terms of geopolitically or militarily. So that is a natural outcome. Any country, if it grows economically, automatically its political power and military power automatically grows. So, China's economic success undermines the West's claim that there is a necessary link between capitalism and liberal democracy. This means what this statement implies is that Western countries claims that it is only democracy or the liberal democracy that leads to increased economic growth, but China has disproved it. That is what this statement says. China, even though it is not a liberal democratic country, it is a kind of dictatorship, but still it is able to prove that it can also register phenomenal growth in economy or income of the people. So that is what this implies. So we are now classifying the various forms of capitalism in three different distinct periods. Okay, one is the classical capitalism. Soon after Industrial Revolution, there was a large growth in capitalist development in UK because it happened in UK. So up to 1914, took place somewhere in 1857 or so, right? 1850s. So from that onwards, up to 1914, UK was the major economy or economic force in the world. So the classical capitalism means there was a lot of economic growth led by, caused by Industrial Revolution. Then if you look at some of the key features of classical capitalism, one important feature is that rising share of capital income in the net national product. That means the capital income from capital has been increasing as a share to the total net national product. Okay, that has been increasing. Then high concentration of capital ownership. Capital ownership has been concentrated with the very few people. Then capital abundant individuals are rich people. Those people who have a lot of capital are also rich in terms of income. Then capital income rich are also labor income rich. So this I will be explaining in one of the later slides. So that means those people who have a lot of capital and earn their income from capital are also getting more income from their labor. So this is a very recent phenomenon which has been happening in the 21st century. So this was not there under classical capitalism. What it implies is that under classical capitalism, only the people who had capital, they earned most of their income or almost 100% of their income only from capital, not from labor. They don't do any work or they don't get any salary from anybody because they have a lot of capital. They don't have to go for work or anything like that. So they invested their capital in the industry and they got dividends, profits, and all those things. Whatever the returns to capital. They didn't earn any income from capital. So that is what it means. So capital income rich are also labor rich, which means a large share of their income also coming from labor. So that is not so in the classical capitalism. Then rich marry each other. So that has happened in the classical capitalism. Rich will marry rich people only. Then there is high correlation of income between parents and children. So that means transmission of advantages over a period of time. Okay, so that was there. Yes, rich people's children will be getting more income. So that way there is an intergenerational transmission of income earning capacity. So that way they will be able to lead to more inequality if the parents are unequal. Okay. Then social democratic capitalism. This is what we saw already about what is social democratic capitalism. This is a system which was in place from the World War II to 1980s or so. So in this period, the US, Europe, all these countries were in almost like a social democratic capitalism in the sense that there was a lot of efforts to redistribute the income in terms of through taxation, allowing trade unions, minimum wages act, and a lot of government provided social security activities resulted in more equitable distribution or egalitarian system of economy that was in place in US and Europe after the World War II. And then what is about the rising share of capital income in net national product? So it was not the rising share of, there was no increase in the capital income in the net national product. Then high concentration of capital ownership, that was there because any capitalism is characterized by high concentration of capital ownership. So that way it was, yes. Then capital abundant individuals are rich, that is there. Yeah, in a capitalist economy it will be there. Capital abundant people will be rich people. Then capital abundant or capital income rich are also labor income rich. It is not there in the social democratic capitalism also. In that respect, it is similar to classical capitalism. And then rich marry each other. That was not there so much. Okay, rich rich did not necessarily marry the rich people. There was no homogamy. Then high correlation of income between parents and children. It was there, but in some cases it is weak. Then we are moving to the liberal democratic capital, meritocratic capitalism, in which we call it meritocratic capitalism because anyone who has the skill and effort, who has skill and who takes effort, can climb up in the economic ladder. That is what we mean by meritocratic capitalism. It is merit, pure merit that decides. No social justice or any kind of affirmative action, all those kind of things. So it is a merit that decides the growth of a person. So if he is meritorious, skilled, and hardworking, then naturally he will come up. That is the basic ideology of meritocratic capitalism. So this is the system that is in place after 1990s or 1980s and up to till date. So especially in the 21st century, this has become very common, especially in the US. So here the rising share of capital income in net product, that is there. So again, capital income, the share of capital income has started increasing. Then high concentration of capital ownership, that is also there, because capitalism everywhere, there will be a concentration of capital. There is no doubt about that. Then capital abundant individuals are rich necessarily. The labor cannot be rich. It is always there in capitalism that capital abundant people are always rich. Then the next thing is very important. Capital income rich are also labor income rich. Yes, under liberal meritocratic capitalism, it is there because people who are earning lot of income from capital, they have also started earning lot of their income from labor also. So they get income from the wealth or capital they own, and also they get lot of income from their labor. Why this happens or how this happens, we will see in one of the future slides. Okay, so rich marry each other. That is what, the homogamy. That is very common nowadays. Rich people will not marry a poor person. So rich marrying rich is very common. And interracial transmission of immune capacity. There's a correlation between the parents and children that is very high. So these are all the certain key features of liberal meritocratic capitalism, which I have. This is useful to understand what has been happening in the world. So my reasoning for including this slide, the previous slide, is to make you understand what has been over across the world. So how the economies have changed from our capitalism, whether it is classical capitalism or social democratic capitalism or liberal meritocratic capitalism, all are capitalist systems. But within this, within the capitalist system, there were three distinct phases or stages or something like that. One was what was there in the UK before 1914. And then second is the social democratic capitalism from World War II to 1980 or so. And then third is liberal meritocratic capitalism that is in vogue in US and in maybe in some of the Western European countries also, but most predominantly in US in the 21st century. So these three systems are in terms of certain criteria. So this is what I presented in the previous step. So the characteristics of every capitalist system is the division of income between the factors capital and worker, capital and labor. These are the two important factors of production. So this division need not be two distinct classes of individuals. That means the owners of capital need not be necessarily the owners of capital only. They can also have some amount of labor. So they may be earning some income from capital also, labor also. That is the distinctive characteristics of liberal meritocratic capitalism. Whereas in the olden days, in the classical capitalism or even in the social democratic capitalism, capital owners will not be going as labor and working as a labor. But in liberal meritocratic capitalism, this is happening. So that is what we mean by this division need not coincide with two distinct classes of individuals. So, that I already explained. this class overlap is what distinguishes different types of capitalism. In the previous table, the main feature that distinguishes three different forms of capitalism is whether the capital income rich people are also labor income rich. So that was not so in the previous two forms of capitalism, and that is the most important feature of the present phase of capitalism, that is liberal meritocratic capitalism. This is happening not only to a large extent in India. Nowadays, most of the rich people are also earning a lot of the income from labor. That is very important feature of the modern day world. So, okay, this tendency has been quite strong. So we will skip these things here without losing a lot of time for this. So, yeah. A rising share of capital in the total income affects interpersonal income distribution because typically people who draw a large share of income from capital are rich, and capital income is concentrated in relatively few hands. So capital is concentrated in few hands. Naturally, those people who draw a large share of income from capital are rich. So that is a very obvious thing. So these two factors result almost automatically in greater income inequality between individuals. Okay, so this will definitely, so more capital concentrated in few hands, and larger share of income from capital are rich people. So these two factors put together leads to concentration of income and increase in the inequality between individuals. So the in the present day world, as I was telling already, capital rich and labor rich people, both in terms of richness, in terms of both capital and labor is possible. So we are now giving an example to understand the concept of capital rich and labor rich. Say, for example, poor person, he gets 4 units of income from labor and 1 unit of income from capital. So total income is 5. This may be 5 lakh rupees or 5 crore. Don't worry about this. So 4 currency units of income comes from labor. That is why he is poor. And only 1 rupee or 1 currency unit of income comes from capital. So total income is 5. So 80%, 20%. Labor income 80%, capital income 20%. Say, for example, for a rich person, in the scenario 1, maybe under classical capitalism or so, labor income was 4 and capital income is 16. So capital income contributes for 80% of his income, labor income contributes for only 20% of his income. So total income is 20. So the inequality is now the ratio between rich people's income and poor person's income. So rich person's income is about 4 times 4% income under scenario 1. In scenario 2, what happens is the rich person who is rich in terms of capital is also rich in terms of labor. So he gets a lot of his income from labor also. So that way his labor income increases from 4 currency units to 8 currency units. And his capital income remains constant as before, 16. So now the scenario 2, the rich person is not only capital income rich, that means he earns more income from capital than the poor person, but he also earns more labor income than the poor person. Whereas poor person earns only 4 currency units of income from labor, but this rich person in scenario 2, that is under liberal meritocratic capitalism, he earns 8 rupees or 8 currency units from labor also. So his labor income is double the labor income of poor person. Okay, so naturally his income increases from 20 currency units in scenario 1 to 24 currency units in scenario 2. So now the inequality has increased. This is what the distinguishing feature of liberal meritocratic capitalism. So rich people, they have not only high capital, they also have more labor. So human capital, labor means human capital. So now the inequality between these two things, that is ratio of rich person's income in scenario 2 to the poor person's income. So it is almost 5 times, 24 versus 5. So it is almost 5 times the income. So this is how the rich people started earning more of their income, not only from capital, but also from labor in the most recent decades, especially in the 21st century. This has happened not only in US, as I already told you, this is happening everywhere. So in situations 2 is more unequal. So people who are rich in capital rich also to be labor rich, so human capital. So people at the top of the income distribution under classical capitalism where only financiers, maybe they will be owning capital and leasing out this capital to others, and rentiers, who will be making most their income from rent. So interest, rent, financier means they will be earning their income from interest, then rent, then owners of large industrial holdings, so they may be getting dividends and profits and other things. So these are the only three activities that were undertaken by the rich people, or the people who are at the top of the income distribution under classical capitalism. They will be getting interest income, rental income, and profits and dividends. But nowadays they are also getting large amount of their income from salaries or wages. So nowadays the rich people are people at the top are highly paid managers, web designers, physicians, investment bankers, and other allied professionals. So that means a lot of these people are earning their income from labor, because they, as a web designer, or as a physician, or as an investment banker, you are getting salary. So apart from your dividends and profits that you are getting from your capital, you are also getting a lot of your income from your labor. Okay, so that is why the labor income is more for modern rich people than in the previous two phases of capitalism. So this is a very important feature. So this has deepened the inequality. So, okay, that is what this says. Okay. So this is a peculiarity of liberal meritocratic capitalism. That is the latest phase of capitalism. Earlier it was not there. So marriage pattern. So I think with this, I have a lot of other slides also, but I will close very soon within another 10 minutes or so. So this is a very important thing, marriage pattern, how people pair up. So in the earlier classical capitalism also, there was a tendency that rich people will be marrying rich people only. But nowadays it is most, almost 100%. It is the most common way of pairing up among the people. So liberal meritocratic capitalism differs from other two capitalisms. After World War II, men tended to marry women from a similar status group, but the richer the husband, the less likely the wife would work and have her own earnings. So what would happen is that after the World War II, rich people will marry rich women only. But what will happen is that after marriage, the women going for work is almost nil in the case of previous phases of capitalism. Okay, so even though the rich will marry rich, but still after marriage the women working is very less. But in the liberal meritocratic capitalism, this is not so. Today, rich people and more educated men tend to marry rich and more educated women. So this is what we call assortative mating. That is, this pushes up inequality very much, because when the two people join together and they earn large part of their income from labor and capital, then naturally their income will be increasing at increasing rate as compared to the poor people. So the assortative mating is finding your mate or life partner from your own class, that is from rich class, and also that after marriage these women also continue to work, they continue to be in the labor force. So that is the main important thing. So this is mainly made possible through the human capital. Intergenerational inequality is increasing over a period of time if this happens. So we will now summarize the key features of liberal meritocratic capitalism before we will look at some of that quickly. So one is a rising aggregate share of capital in the net income. So capital share in the net income is increasing. Then leverage capitalist leverage. Then great prevalence of assortative mating. So marrying among the same class of people. Then greater intergenerational transmission of inequality. Inequality getting transmitted from one generation to other generation. Then capital income is extremely concentrated and received mostly by the rich of capital in the hands of very rich people. So this is another. So why labor share in national income? This is mainly because decreasing relative bargaining power of labor versus capital. This has happened especially after the globalization, after the 1980s or so, or after 1990s, I would say, in India and China. So this has happened mainly because weakening of the trade unions. Everywhere there is privatization. There is weakening of trade unions. So naturally, wages are stagnating, or labor are very much negatively affected. So this has contributed for decreasing share in the decreasing share of labor in the national income. Then decreasing cost of capital goods. That means cost of capital goods is decreasing. So more people are investing their money in capital goods, and capital is replacing labor. So there is reduced wages or reduced labor income. And capital deepening technological progress. Technological progress is itself is labor displacing or capital deepening. Then increase in demand for high skilled labor. So low skilled people are getting very low income because there is a huge demand for high skilled people. There is less demand for or decreasing demand for low skilled people. So this way. So now we are going to quickly see the income inequality in some of the countries. Top 10% national income share across the world. So this has increased. I mean, this is very high in Middle East and India. If you see, top 10% of the people earn 55% of the total national income. So 10% of the people earn about 55% of the national income in India. Okay, this is highest in Middle East where it is 61%. Just 10% of the population, top 10%, they earn 61% of their national income. But in India also it is very high, and also in Brazil. So if you look at this graph over a period of time from 1980 onwards, how the top 10% income share across the world in many countries is increasing between 1980 to 2016. So if you look at the yellow line, that is for India, it has been sharply increasing as compared to other people, other countries. So now, it is, as we saw in the previous graph, it is 55%. Just 10% of the people earn 55% of the national income. So this is same thing. And we are now comparing top 1% with bottom 50%. So just in US, top 1%, they earn almost 20% of national income, whereas bottom 50% they earn only in 2015 or so it is only 13% or something like that. So top 1% earns more than bottom 50%. So just 1% of the people earn the total income that is more than 50% of the people's income. So this is in the case of Western Europe, where there is a difference between the US and Western Europe. In Western Europe, top 1% share is much less than that bottom 50% share. So that way, European countries are more egalitarian as compared to US. So in US, the inequality is more. And this is now this I am skipping. And emerging countries, we will focus more on. I will skip a lot of these graphs for want of time, and I will move on to Indian situation. What is happening in India? Yeah, top 10% and middle 40%. So especially after 2000, year 2000, if you compare, the top 10% income share has increased to 55%, and 40%, its income share is only 30% or less than that. Okay, so this is the trend in India. So there is a huge divergence between the top 10% and the middle 40%. If you take top 10%, top 1% and middle 50, bottom 50%, look at the graph, red line and the blue line. If you compare, the top 1% is earning more than the bottom 50%. So the income share of top 1% is more than the bottom 50% of the people. So much has been the inequality, especially after 2000, year 2000. So this from this book, same data, top 1%, and okay. So total income growth by percentage in income India. So whose income grows at a faster rate? So this is highest growth rate for high income people. The income grows at a rate almost 2,500% growth in income. So these things. So consequences. So I will be closing in another 5 minutes. So consequences. What are the consequences of inequality? One is the climate change and inequality. There is a strong relationship, and people have found that inequality has been increased by about 25% purely because of climate change. Because climate change affects the most vulnerable people. So their assets and their wealth get destroyed because of climate change or something like that. So their income earning opportunities are reduced. So without climate change, the income inequality would have been 25% less than what it is now. So climate change has contributed for higher inequality. And then social unrest. Consequence is social unrest. So that is a very important consequence of inequality. Then political instability. That is also a very important. So whenever there is an inequality, there is a lot of scope for violence, civil war, and all those kind of things. And then productivity and economic growth. Recent studies have found out that productivity and economic growth are negatively affected because of high inequality. So high income inequality and wealth inequality leads to reduced productivity growth and reduced economic growth. Then there is potential for lack of trust in more unequal societies. More unequal societies are characterized by lack of trust. So the lack of trust leads to increase in transaction cost because everything has to be contracted and legally and formally registered. So that leads to increase in transaction cost. So nobody trusts another person's words. So you don't have faith on what your neighbor says or what someone assures you. So everything. So you cannot rely on people by their word of mouth. So you have to, legally or formally register every simple thing or register every contract. So that has resulted in increase in transaction. So then inequality, this is different phenomena. So this I will not talk much about this. Maybe in another class, another seminar, we will see this. So velvet rope economy. Then social separatism. So rich seek private solutions for many problems. This is a very important implication of inequality because as income increases for a very minor group of people, a small section of the people, what they will do is they will try to seek their over all common problems, say lack of protection or healthcare problem or anything or education problem. It is a common problem which government has to invest. But what the rich people will do because of their inequality, because of their very income, they will try to find out their own private solutions for a lot of common problems. Say, for example, you have a law and order problem. You instead of forcing the government or pressurizing the government to improve law and order, I appoint my own private security. Or the public institutions are degrading in public educational institutions. What the people in the country as a whole have to do is that they have to pressurize the government to increase or improve the quality of the public educational institutions. But as inequality increases, so a small section of people with a lot of income, what they will do is that they will start their own university or they will go for private universities. Okay, so they find private solutions for common problems, and there is a less demand for improvement in the quality of the common infrastructure that is shared by the common people. So this we can visibly see in many countries, including in our countries. Why so many private universities nowadays? Because there is a huge demand. From whom this the demand comes? It is especially from the rich people. So public universities or public educational institutions are going down in terms of their quality, and side by side there is an increasing demand for private educational institutions and private universities, especially coming from the rich people. So this is a very important. So this has resulted in overall decline in the public infrastructure for the entire poor sections of the people, because nowadays a lot of people, especially the rich people, are seeking solutions without pressurizing the government. So poor people are left in the lurch. So they will be affected. So this is a very important, this is what we call the social separatism. This is a very important consequence of, this inequality. So naturally, so people are seeking personal or private solution, means they will not be ready to come forward to contribute more in terms of the government. They will be reluctant because for all my problems I am solving on myself, on my own, on my personal solutions. So why should I pay tax to the government? So that way people to start thinking, means then there will be erosion of tax base for the government. So tax income for the government will be decreasing. Then bottom line is that very unequal, polarized society cannot easily maintain an extensive welfare state. So welfare state cannot be maintained in such a highly polarized society. Government becomes a welfare state only if it is possible for it to mobilize a lot of income through taxing the rich people and then spending that money for the welfare of the poor people. Then rich people are not coming forward to pay taxes because they are finding their own private solutions for all the common problems encountered by everybody in the country. So they will not be coming forward to contribute tax. So the government's ability to serve the poor or redistribute the income from the rich people to poor people goes down as the society becomes more and more unequal. So this is a very important consequence of inequality. So I think I can stop here. So it is a pretty long talk. Sorry for that. I was more ambitious and I thought I know presenting many things. So that has resulted in long time for completing the presentation. But anyway, so what I try to do here is that, I want to, as agricultural economists, we are always concerned with the microeconomic problems, especially related to agriculture. We never move out of agriculture related problems or one particular sector we are concerned with always agriculture, and that too in a micro level kind of issues. So what I try to do here is to present a picture on what is happening to capitalism and inequality. So what has been even though the global inequality across countries has been decreasing after the globalization, but within country inequality has been increasing over a period of time after the globalization. That is the second aspect. So I wanted to provide an overview of what is the relationship between economic growth and inequality, and what has been happening to the economies of Asia versus the economies of the Western countries, and how the ICT revolution, in contrast to the Industrial Revolution, has been helpful to the Asian economies to close their gap with the Western countries. But still, in spite of the ability to close the gap with the Western countries, we have increased the inequality within our country. So also in China. China also is one of the most unequal societies in the present day world. So that way, I just wanted to present something that we are not regularly dealing with in our discussions or presentations or anything like that. So that is my ambition or goal of this presentation. So I stop here and we will discuss.